question of what is risk management. And I'll first quickly show you this model, which was developed by Colin Fuller, who has a background in industry and then came over into football medicine, applied the same principles that are used in manufacturing industries and elsewhere to football medicine, and it's an interesting read. Now, in a book called Sports Injury Prevention, which was published about 10 years ago, we did publish a paper, Andrew McIntosh and I, where we simplified, but also at the same time expanded this model a little bit to fit in the context of sports medicine. So in that chapter, you will see that we outlined four steps in the process, where the first is to ask the question, what are the risks in my team? The second question is, when is injury risk higher, and possibly also for what? The third question is, well, which of my athletes have a higher or lower risk of a particular injury or injuries in general? And then comes the big question, should we be doing something about it? And the important thing, I think, with Colin Fuller's model is that it doesn't specifically state that every injury or every problem needs to be prevented. It's more a question of making an assessment of risk and then saying, well, that's okay. Or say, this is something we should and can do something about, and then put your money in there. Now, this talk this afternoon will in some ways cover the first three of these questions. And I'll do that by addressing two important tools in our toolbox as clinicians. One is the periodic health examination, or pre-participation examination, or screening examination, or what you want to call it. And the other tool is injury and illness surveillance. And I think there are lots of programs, and we just had a fantastic lecture from Andrea where she talked about the program at the Australian Institute of Sport, where the additional component of load and load response and performance monitoring comes into this. But I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, Marco, relax. You're going to have a world expert who's going to cover that later, so that will not be part of my talk. I will also, throughout this talk, try to make it practical. And I'll draw on some examples from Aspetar, and I'll also draw on some of the examples from the Regional Olympic Training Center, where we work with our national teams and our Olympic team in trying to prepare them for the next Olympic Games. So these are the two topics that I'll be focusing on, and we'll start out with a focus on the periodic health evaluation. And about 10 years ago, this group of experts was convened by the IOC to write a consensus statement, a consensus paper on the periodic health evaluation. That's the term that we landed on in 2009. And in that paper, which is quite extensive, one of the questions, obviously, that is asked there, and which we try to answer is, why would you do a periodic health evaluation? And there are a number of reasons why you might want to do that. And I think the one and the most luring of those aims would be to be able to identify the high-risk athlete. This is the athlete I need to focus on with my prevention program. The other, perhaps obvious aim could be to identify athletes who are sick or ill or injured, I mean, at the time, so to identify existing problems. A third aim could be that the things that you do in that exam when the athlete is healthy could serve as a baseline, so that when the athlete later is injured, can be used as a baseline to compare with. So let's say he has an ACL injury and you know what his strength parameters are before he gets injured, or you know where you should be aiming to get him or her before they go back to sports, perhaps. In this world with our stringent anti-doping regulations, we as physicians are particularly interested in knowing anything the athlete might be taking that might represent a problem in terms of doping controls. So reviewing their medications and their supplements could be one reason to do this. To establish rapport, relationship with the athlete. Maybe not, we think that it's important for us to get to know the athlete, but I can assure you that perhaps the most important part of this process is for the athlete to get to know you, to establish that trust that will enable them to search, to seek your advice when he or she has a problem. And then perhaps, and this is the final one, you can take the picture, yeah. Norway is not a litigious society, but there are requirements in international sports where even we in Norway will have to do physical or a pre-participation examination if required by an international federation such as the IAAF or FIFA or UEFA or whatever it may be. All right, so I'll start with number one then, identifying the high-risk athlete. How many of you have heard me talk about that before? Okay, quite a few, good, because I will not be talking about it today. I'll just simply sum up that 45-minute talk saying that injury prediction does not work. Trust me. If you don't trust me, read that paper. If you don't trust me after you've read that paper, come and see me and I'll try and explain why. Okay. So forget injury prediction. We cannot do tests to say you're going to get injured, you're not going to get injured. That is a waste of time. So let's then go to the second step, and that is, can we identify existing health problems, or will we identify existing health problems if we do screen a group of athletes? So the question is this, and the answer is of course yes. And this is an example of an MRI taken by one of our snowboard athletes, a female athlete who came to the screening exam in the spring after the season was over last year, so this is a year ago. This MRI shows a pelvic fracture. Yes, she had fallen, and yes, she had had some pain, but she had completed the season and thought that this pain was just part of life as a snowboarder and was prepared to go into her pre-season hard physical fitness training with this injury, which obviously would not have been a good idea. But to look at this a little bit more systematically, we set out here at Aspetar to where we took advantage of the excellent, fantastic screening clinic that we have at the hospital. And if you haven't seen it and you haven't been there, then I would recommend that you go over and have a look and ask someone to show you around, where the program involves a comprehensive examination, including this and more, of all the athletes who come there for a pre-participation exam or a screening exam. And what we did was we did this, excuse me, in a systematic way on all the football players playing in the QSL, the Qatar Stars League, before the seasons 2013 and 2014, and then followed these athletes for 2 years after that to see who got injured and who did not got injured. Now, the interesting question right now was, what did we find in these 600 plus football players? And we defined a significant finding as any condition that required any type of follow-up. In other words, an existing problem that required some further evaluation or follow-up. And what we found was that, yes, 96% of the players had some kind of a health problem. And that's usually not how you think about elite athletes, is it? That we like to think of them as being healthy. Now, the interesting finding is that here in Qatar, there's no sun, right? So we have a huge problem with vitamin D deficiency. You're laughing, right? But how much sun have you had today? You've been in Qatar all day? Not much, probably. And the athletes do the same thing. It's too hot outside, so they stay inside and don't get any sun. 1/3 of them, and that's an important finding here, had a musculoskeletal problem at the time of screening. And this is a pre-season screening, so they go into the season with a problem. If we compare that to data from Norway, from the screening that we do there, which is very similar, it's a half a day full day spent in our health department seeing various staff, and we typically organize this on a team basis, where a team of 4 to 6 people are involved in doing a full screening exam of some national team of some sort during a day. And usually we can manage to do 10 or 12 players in one day if we really work hard at it. What I'll share with you now is the findings from the Rio 2016 team, when these were screened 1 year prior to the Rio Games, including the Olympic athletes, 128 of them, as you see, a mix of sports, and on the left side, the Paralympic athletes, so 28 of these athletes. And what we found there is very similar. At the time of screening, 87% of the athletes had 1 or more health problems. On the average, 2 health problems per Olympic athletes, and you see that Paralympic athletes, not surprisingly, have 3, so 1 more on average compared to the Olympic athletes. Almost 2/3 of them had a musculoskeletal pain overuse problem at the time. 12% of them had an acute injury that wasn't completely healed or dealt with. And 52% of them, and I think that now you can take the picture, this is the last one here on this slide, 52% of them had an illness of some sort, of a chronic nature, including allergies, asthma, that type of thing. 10% of them, and it's quite remarkable what we found. So a 30% side-to-side difference in quadriceps strength 5 years after an ACL injury, which would have gone undetected unless you stopped and tested and actually looked, what is your fitness level, what is your condition like at this time. 2 of the athletes were taking medications that we didn't know about, that were unknown to us, and we didn't even know what they were. 3 of them were taking non-approved nutritional supplements, and 8 of them, so that's about 4% in total, or 5% in total, were taking nutritional supplements, and they were advised to change their habit. Imagine what we know, unfortunately, what an what's the word? Not unplanned positive doping test, that's a very bad term to use, but an accidental doping test, positive doping test in an elite athlete, is a tragedy for the athlete and for the team, obviously. So we have similar data from 2 screening programs, and those of you who are doing screening on your athletes, I've seen some people nodding in the room while I was talking. This is not surprising at all. But they do highlight the potential for problems to go poorly managed or under the radar or undetected. So while identifying the high-risk athlete is not an option, identifying existing problems clearly is. This point about reviewing medication and supplements, clearly also important. We have learned from practice how important it is that the athletes know who we are. Clearly important, while the final point there is not as important for us unless an international federation requires a program like that. So yes, a screening program does detect a substantial number of health problems in athletes. But the question you might ask yourself is, shouldn't we already know about them? And this brings us to the second part of the talk, and that is on the injury and illness surveillance. Well, if the athlete is new to you, you can know about it, obviously. But if you take care of a team for years, then maybe you think you know about most of the problems that athletes might have. So the second part is focusing then on the injury and illness surveillance. And there are many reasons why we do this at the Norwegian Olympic Training Center. Because it is challenging to provide medical support to a team like that. We have lots of small teams, especially in the summer. I usually say that we have enough rowers to fill one boat. They typically win a medal, yes, but we don't have a lot of high performance athletes in some of the sports. And they live and travel all over the world. all the time. And in a few sports, and few of these sports have a medical doctor or a physical therapist taking care of the team year-round. And athletes also relate to a multitude of doctors and physios. So imagine a Tour de France cyclist cycling on a professional team, living in Monaco. He has a doctor in Monaco. He has the team doctor that follows the team. He spends part of the time of the year in Norway, where he has a local doctor that he may relate to. He has the national team doctor for the Norwegian cycling team, and we have the medical team at the Olympic Training Center, may be the fourth of them. And communication between these groups is often poor. Athletes are slow to report problems, new health problems, at least to the Olympic medical team. They might just go to the local doctor and ask for help. And therefore, there are many problems that are undetected or unknown to us, at least in the early stages. They come to us when the problem is big. We'd like to know about it before we get to that stage. So surveillance has two complementary benefits. One is on the individual level for the athlete to facilitate communication within the team that takes care of the athlete. And also at the big picture level, and as the CMO of the Norwegian Olympic Committee, I would like to be able to learn from what we did in the last Olympic Games to try and do better in the next Olympic Games. And to do that, I need data. And this process provides that type of data, as I'll show you. But it is important that we're not doing this as a research project. We are doing this only if it provides a benefit to the athletes and the team around the athlete. It should have direct and immediate benefit to the participants, namely the athlete and the coaching team, and us as health providers as well, of course. So we've been doing this for a while now, since 2 years also, 2010, so we have 9 years, I guess, of experience of monitoring our Winter and Summer Olympic teams. And normally when you do an injury surveillance program or an injury or illness monitoring program like this, you'll organize it like this. You'll have your teams, you have the medical team, and then there's a project manager of some sort in the center who collects all the data in here. The problem with and this is an example of our Summer Olympic teams, is that we're small. So yes, the handball team, they have a doctor and a physio, but there are teams in here that has no medical staff associated with the team. The federation simply doesn't have the money to pay for that. So they do not have anyone who follows them up on a 24-hour basis. They can always come to the Olympic Training Center and get help when they're injured, but there is no one who is planning medical services and injury and illness prevention measures in the team. So what we do then, preparing for each Olympic Games, is that we reorganize ourselves and assign staff from the Olympic Training Center to take care of and follow up each of these teams. So this is the organization for the last Olympic Games, and approximately the correct number of athletes as well. So the normal process is this: from the athlete reporting an injury and illness, this is the UEFA system, to the medical team, and the medical team reporting that data into a database. In our case, it's a little bit different. So this works with the athlete completing a weekly questionnaire that goes into a database. The medical team gets an alert if something is reported on their cell phones and on their emails, and they are then responsible for following up individually and report back to the database, getting the exact medical information into the database. Now, most of the time, by the time they fill in this questionnaire, you would hope that the athlete has called you already and told you about this. So this is the safety net. This is the safety net. They're not meant to wait to seek help until they get the alert to respond to the questionnaire. Now, the questionnaire we used was mentioned earlier by Andrea. So this is the Oslo Sports Trauma Research Center questionnaire on health problems. validated and designed to capture all types of health problems, even the smaller health problems. They get 4 key questions on an app on their phone every week, asking about their health over the last 7 days, whether they have no problem or could not participate at all along this scale here, relating to their sports participation, whether they've had to modify their training, whether their performance is affected, and whether they have any symptoms of any kind. I think many of you are familiar with this questionnaire by now. They also get follow-up questions if they report a problem, whether it's an overuse injury, an illness, or an acute injury. What region, what symptoms, is it a new problem, did it cause time loss, how much, and importantly, who knows about it. And they can also send comments, so when I get the alert, I already know quite a bit about the problem before I call the athlete. This information goes into the database. The alert goes to the doctor, and then I, as a health professional, will go in and fill in that information on the database backend. So this is what it looks like then for the CMO of the team, or the project manager, who is Ben Clarkson, who many of you know. That's his picture up in the right-hand corner. And this is this morning's view of all the candidates for the Tokyo Olympics. What is it, 1.5 years or less, a little over a year from now. We know about every athlete preparing for the games. We follow about twice as many athletes as those we expect will actually go to Tokyo. I happen to take care of one of these teams, and that is the beach volleyball team. And some of you might laugh, Norway beach volleyball, isn't it cold up there? Yeah, it was snowing this morning. I had pictures from my friends. But these guys at the top of the podium there are actually ranked #1 in the world at the moment, and won the European Championship and the World Finals last year. Please don't take a picture or tweet this. I've anonymized them slightly, and I'll show it very quickly. But this is what I saw this morning when I went in and checked. And what you see here is a green, 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 green this week, and this is the last 6 weeks for each of these players. So they're now healthy, and they're out there playing with no health problems, nothing to care about. And this is very helpful for me, because one team is now in China. One of the two, the one pair is in China, or on their way back to Europe, I have no idea. And another team is playing in Malaysia, or was playing in Malaysia yesterday. And this is the world of beach volleyball. They're all over the world all the time. So to call to check is pretty much impossible. If I then went to click on one of the athletes here, I get a picture, in this case over the last 12 months, of all the health problems that athlete has had during that period, with detailed information on diagnosis and everything easily accessible on the website. And the important thing with this is that when I sit down with these guys, and I do that every 6 months, so twice a year, I first ask them, well, how have you been? Oh, fine, no problems, okay. We open the website, okay, no problems. You lost 25 days of training last year. What do you mean, no problem? Because they do tend to forget at least about the minor things. So I bet you this athlete can remember one of the injuries, but has forgotten about the others when we sit down. And then we can have a discussion about what we can do for him over the next 6 months to make sure that he is fit and healthy and can train and play. So this is the direct benefit that I have taking care of these 4 athletes on the beach volleyball team. Hugely important tool for me, especially with this group of traveling athletes. Then some data examples on the global level, so on the team level, for the entire Olympic team or one of the subgroups of the team, where there is a range of metrics that we use to look at this, and you can calculate anything any way you like. I'm just showing you some examples. So for Winter Olympians, this is the average injury prevalence. So at any given time, and this is the 55 weeks leading up to the Pyeongchang, how do you pronounce that? Yeah. Anyway, China, place in China where they had the Olympic, Korea, was it? Korea. Next time is China, that's Beijing. Sorry about that. Anyway, 1 in 5 athletes had an injury at any given time during this period. And if we look at what we call the upside down sports, so these are the crazy sports where you do things on snow, which require you to be airborne somehow, then we can see that 1 in 4 athletes, or 1 in 3 athletes, was injured at any given time. So if your children talk about starting sports like this, please, get them into chess or something. This is not the best thing to be doing. Then illness, 10% ill at any given time. And we have some sports, of course, which we would think perhaps are where you're more prone to illness, and this is an example of biathlons. That's where you do cross-country skiing and you shoot at targets every now and then. And you see that the number is even higher, 16% of the athletes ill at any given time. And we can do all types of statistics, and we do, to prepare for the next games. Summer versus winter is one of them, and Paralympic athletes versus able-bodied athletes is another one. Just a random example of Youth Olympic Games and Olympic Games over the most recent period here. And you can see that there's a wide variation in this case, illness incidence. So the question is, of course, whether this is something that has helped us win gold medals lately. That we don't know. But what we do know is that there are some success factors which have to be in place for a surveillance program or monitoring program like this to work, for this process to work smoothly. One of them is that the technology needs to work. If you have problems with a tool, if it's cumbersome, if you have to remember passwords and reset and things don't work, that is a huge problem. Everything needs to work every time. Do test your system before you set out using it on athletes. And if we look at our experience from London and up until today, you can see that it's been quite variable. In the beginning, we had a system that we built ourselves using a quest-back questionnaire and Excel formats and emails and SMS text messages. And we actually had a pretty good response rate. What this means is that every week, somewhere between 80 and 84% of the responses from a team of about 250 athletes was collected. We went to an app solution. Unfortunately, there were a lot of technical problems with it, and you can see how it dropped. Still, there were teams that had 100%. So the handball coach said, you want to play handball? You do this shit. Otherwise, you don't play handball, at least not for me. Okay. And now, without using the stick, we're over 90% with the team going into Tokyo in terms of response rate. But there has to be a carrot in there as well. And as I said initially, our guiding philosophy is that this needs to have a direct and immediate benefit. The athletes need to know, they need to feel that this is working for them. So when they report a problem, there is an action, and they know who they're talking to at the other end. They're not just talking to an anonymous system and putting data into some researcher's database. That is critically important. Because they'll be asking, what's in it for me? The player will ask, what's in it for me? The medical team, the physio, will ask, what's in it for me? And the coach is going to ask, what's in it for me? And in our experience, and we have 4 colleagues, I have 4 colleagues here taking care of our athletes on the athletics team sitting here who have a lot of experience in monitoring athletics athletes. So if you want to know how that works in their context, can you please stand up so people can see what you look like? So if you want to ask about how this works in athletics, go talk to those guys afterwards. I have no idea. Okay. Anyway, this is what we're after. So the athlete, he wants perfect medical care. The doctor and the physio wants this to make his job easier, not more difficult, not more stuff to do. And the coach wants greater availability. He wants his athletes to be healthy all the time. So I'm almost at the end here. My take-home messages are, I think, pretty simple. There are 2, so you can hold your camera until both are up on the screen. So we do believe that good screening and monitoring data does inform risk management, both on the individual level and at the team level, and that means for the Olympic team as a whole. But for a system like that to work, there needs to be direct benefits for all those involved, athletes, medical staff, and coaches. And now perhaps you think that we have the perfect system in Norway and that we do prepare really well for the Olympic Games, but I'll show you one example of how badly prepared we were for the Pyeongchang, and that's in Korea, Olympic Games by showing you a video which I taped in our cafeteria halfway through the Pyeongchang Olympic Games. Here we go. Complete fuck up in preparations. Did I say that out loud? Sorry. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'll also use this opportunity to invite all of you to, first of all, submit abstracts and workshop proposals for Monaco, the world's first and only conference focusing on injury and illness prevention in athletes. But most importantly, for you to be there, because I can promise you, if you go to the website, you can see for yourself. It's a fantastic program. Thanks to others, not to me. Thank you very much.